بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وزدنا علما اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم ربنا آتنا من لدنك رحمة وهيئ لنا من أمرنا رشدا صلى الله النبي الكريم. First of all, we're extremely humbled and grateful for the opportunity. We're very extremely grateful to Mawlana Qasim and Garsab and the entire team at Jame Masjid Abu Bakr for giving us this opportunity. We're very humbled and appreciative to be here. We're also very appreciative to everyone here, all of the attendees, for taking out their time for this. May Allah Ta'ala accept it from us all, inshallah. So the brief, as we all know, this topic of discussion today will be about al-Rijal and a brief introduction to the science of al-Rijal. A brief introduction to the science of al-Rijal. So what we'll do, the general... So the general outline for today's discussion will be that we'll do an introduction, just talk about why we're talking about this and some, general comments. Then we'll go over a brief history of hadith documentation. Then we'll discuss specific aspects of Rijal, and if we have time at the end, we'll discuss some books of Rijal as well. There are also some handouts that are being printed out right now, so hopefully those will be available also for all of us to follow along with as well, inshallah. So with that stated, inshallah, bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So this is a statement from Ali ibn Madini. So Imam Bukhari's main teacher was Ali ibn Madini in terms of the science of hadith, in terms of ilal and things like that. He says, التفقه في معاني الحديث نصف العلم ومعرفة الرجال نصف العلم. That knowing the meaning of the hadith is half of knowledge or half of what we need to know, but knowing the narrators, that's the other half of it. وَمَعْرِفَةُ الرِّجَالِ نِصْفُ الْعِلْمِ. And generally what happens is that when we read hadith, then this is how normally we focus on mostly the matan, and a lot of the discussion comes from the matan, which is very good and is very important. But there's a lot that also exists in the sanad as well. That's oftentimes maybe we may just not really grasp those aspects of it, or maybe we may deem it to be too difficult. So what we wanted to do today is just try to give some general pointers regarding al-Rijal so that we'll understand that it's really not so difficult, and with a few general pointers, we'll be able to really, inshallah, we hope, grasp a lot. Yeah, sure. So with these few general pointers, we'll hopefully, inshallah, be able to grasp a lot. Generally, one of the reasons that we find it difficult to, get ourselves accustomed to al-Rijal or looking at the sanad is because we look at the sheer volume of information. And we see that it's so much information that exists. We look at books of narrators of hadith, like Tahdhib al-Kamal, for example. We see that there's more than 8,000 people there. And we say that it's too much for anybody to learn, which maybe it is. It does seem overwhelming. But then perhaps this is based on maybe two, ideas that perhaps are both incorrect. One of them is that there's a statement, as we all have heard probably, مَا لَا يُدْرَكُ كُلُّهُ لَا يُتْرَكُ كُلُّهُ. If you can't get everything of something, that doesn't mean that you don't do anything. But generally the approach with myself and many people in general is that our initial perception with al-Rijal, with the concept of the sanad, is that there's too much. مَا لَا يُدْرَكُ كُلُّهُ يُتْرَكُ كُلُّهُ. Let's just do nothing. So that's one thing, which is perhaps a misunderstanding. Another thing is that we may think that there is an equal distribution. So if there's 8,000 plus 9,000 narrators that we find in books like Tahdhib al-Kamal, and we assume that they're equally distributed, then we'll say that it's probably too much to learn. But then in reality, it's not actually equally distributed because, you have a very small percentage of ruwat, of narrators, that constitute a large majority of pretty much everything that we see. So then all we really need to do then is, instead of focus on the entirety of the 8,000, then we just focus on that few, and that will provide a very good start for us, because then we'll be able to, inshallah, recognize a lot. So, So with that, inshallah, we can just go ahead and get started. So what we wanted to do is start out the discussion. It'll be, inshallah, displayed in a moment. We wanted to start out the discussion by a brief history of the documentation of hadith. Now, so how many people have heard the objection before that we can't trust hadith because hadith were compiled 200 years later? By show of hands, has anybody heard this before? Okay, probably a good majority of us. Most people have heard this because this is a very common sentiment. Does anyone have any thoughts on that? Is that true? Hadith were compiled 200 years later, so we can't trust them, or maybe we can. Does anyone have any thoughts or comments on that? Feel free, inshallah, to anything that you want to offer. Anyone? Okay. So probably this is a common objection, but probably this is based on the understanding that people like Imam Malik or people like Imam Bukhari, they came around the 200-year mark. Imam Malik passed away in the year 179, Imam Bukhari 256, a little bit after the 200-year mark. But most of the scholars of hadith came after the year 200, the ones that compiled books that we read today. So then I guess the natural thought is that that must be when hadith were compiled. And this is something that Muslims say that... This is something that Muslims say, something that non-Muslims say as well. It's just a very common thing that people say. But then... Oh, something that we probably should say before we proceed. So why is this important? Why is it even important to understand al-Rijal, to know about the sanad? Number one, muhaddithun have done a lot of khidmah. In fact, one scholar from South Africa, Mawlana Quran, mentioned that it seems that 90% of the focus of the earlier scholars was on the sanad, maybe 10% on the matan. But in today's time, it seems that the paradigm has flipped. It seems that we have maybe 99% focus on the matan and maybe 1% on the sanad. But in other words, there's a lot of khidmah that's already been done regarding the sanad and regarding ilm al-Rijal. So the first and foremost, is that we want to understand the kalam of the muhaddithun, understand what they're saying. So, for example, we may say that why study usul al-fiqh? Because we're not going to be mujtahideen anyway. We're not going to create our own madhab, so what's the point? All of us know that when we study fiqh, after studying usul al-fiqh, if someone tried to study hidayah without studying any usul al-fiqh, then do you think that they would understand it easily or not? Probably not, because they would just not understand the connection between things or underlying philosophy. Right? So then if you understand the methodology behind why the people are saying what they're saying, why the fuqaha are doing what they're doing, then it makes understanding the masail a lot easier. Similarly, if we understand a little bit about ilm al-Rijal, then what ends up happening is that the muhaddithun, what they're saying, just makes so much more sense. So when I initially studied Sunan al-Tirmidhi in Dawra, then the comments of Imam Tirmidhi after the hadith, or the comments of Abu Dawud, which are a bit shorter in his own book, I would just read it and just kind of read it for the sake of reading it. Then after studying a little bit more of this, when I read it again, then I realized that there's so much more depth in it that I was missing the first time. So understanding the kalam muhaddithun. Another thing is better understanding fiqh and appreciating fiqh that's derived from hadith. So now we may know that Imam Malik will accept one hadith, Imam Abu Hanifa might not accept that same hadith, but it's very difficult if we don't understand kind of the underlying philosophy behind it, that what was going into analyzing those hadith. And then finally, and arguably even most importantly, defending the sunnah against modern critics. So nowadays, perhaps one of the greatest fitnas that we have today is the fitna of rejection of hadith. And pretty much what we see is that... So pretty much what we see is that every single group that's deviant at some level or another, the common theme in all of them is rejection of hadith. So be it modernists, be it liberals, feminists, or even historical groups like the Shias, if you ask any of them, if you want to look to see any common theme in any of them, the common theme is rejection of hadith. Now why is that? Because everyone accepts the Quran, but then the hadith is what explains the Quran. وَأَنزَلْنَا إِلَيْكَ الذِّكْرَ لِتُبَيِّنَ لِلنَّاسِ مَا نُزِّلَ إِلَيْهِمْ. so that the Prophet ﷺ could explain to people what was revealed to them. Now, if we take that away, and that's no longer there anymore, then a person can make the Quran mean whatever they want it to mean as long as they're creative enough. We may say, no, that's not the right interpretation, but they'll say, well, that's your interpretation, this is mine. So someone may say that, for example, they believe that it is okay, a person who is muntasib ila al-Islam says that I believe that it's okay for one man to marry another man, na'udhu billah. And we'll say, no, that's condemned by the Quran. The story of the people of Lut alayhi salam, many other ayahs, إِنَّكُمْ لَتَأْتُونَ الرِّجَالَ شَهْوَةً مِّن دُونِ النِّسَاءِ بَلْ أَنْتُمْ قَوْمٌ مُسْرِفُونَ. So it's impermissible. And they say, well, no, that's just when it was non-consensual. If two people just love, they don't have any problem with each other, so why do you have a problem with what they're doing? So we'll say that's the wrong interpretation, and that's not what the Quran actually means. But then now, what is our basis for that? In essence, our basis for understanding the Quran as it's meant to be understood, you can say, by and large, is the hadith corpus. And if someone removes that, then as long as they're creative, they can just make the Quran mean whatever they want it to mean. So really what ittiba' al-hawa is, all these modern groups, pretty much it amounts to that. But the access point, the thing that leads them to that, being able to do that ittiba' al-hawa, making the deen whatever they want, making it be whatever they want it to be, is just removing hadith. And then they can make the deen as they want it. So now, the most sophisticated attacks against hadith, or against the deen in general, they come from rejection of hadith. And nowadays, in the last century, we've had very, very, very sophisticated attacks against hadith. So just like the Western powers came and they colonized Muslim lands, they did isti'marul buldan. But then they also wanted to try to dominate at a theological or religious level and show the Muslims that they were conquering that their religion doesn't have any basis. Na'udhu billah. So then what they did was they funded people to actually write against hadith and research against it. And the reason that they tried to attack hadith and they made that their focal point was because the Quran is relatively difficult for a person to make objections about or attack. Even the Orientalists, the Western critics, will agree that the Quran is from the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But now with hadith, then they have a field day, and they come up with all these elaborate objections. And now what ends up happening is that it's very difficult for us to understand any of this if we don't have basis in just understanding things about ilm al-hadith, about ilm al-Rijal, stuff like that. So once we begin understanding that, then we can look at their objections and say, oh, that doesn't make any sense. That's baseless because of this. But then if we don't have that understanding, then it's very difficult for us to defend the sunnah. And then, as I said, this is perhaps one of the greatest attacks against our deen in general, because now we have other fields of deen as well. We have fiqh, we have aqidah, and of course there's tafsir, different things like that. But then if we remove hadith, then that's sort of the basis from which fiqh arises. At a broad level, that's a basis from which aqidah arises as well. And then that's the basis for understanding the interpretation of the Quran as well. So removing that essentially would cause the whole deen to, essentially, there wouldn't be much left of it. So that's why people tend to direct their attacks against the sunnah. So by understanding ilm al-Rijal, then we can kind of like see where they're coming from and then understand that it's baseless. So with that stated, then we're back to this objection. So can we rely on hadith, considering that hadith was compiled 200 years later? So then now, in order to understand this, we have to understand that there is basically, this is a complete false premise. But in order to understand this properly, we understand that there's 5 stages of hadith compilation, right? So this is a very, very basic rudimentary ishkal, saying that Imam Bukhari, Imam Muslim, etc., they lived after the year 200, 256, 261, rahimahullah ta'ala, when they passed away. So it must be that hadith were compiled later. The first thing is that we understand the stages of hadith compilation. So the first stage of hadith compilation is kitaba, so which is simply writing hadith down. And this, of course, happened during the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So, for example, does anyone know the Sahabi who knew the most hadith? Sayyidina Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu. But there's another Sahabi who he said that actually knew more hadith than him. Does anyone know who that is? Anyone? Right, Abdullah bin Amr bin As radiallahu anhu. Does anyone know why Sayyidina Abu Hurairah said that he knows more hadith than me? فَإِنَّهُ كَانَ يَكْتُبُ وَلَا أَكْتُبُ. He would write down hadith and I wouldn't. So of course we see that writing happened in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Some of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum had their own compilations of hadith where they would write it down. So there's, you can say, informal kitaba. It wasn't anyone compiling a book per se, but they were compiling. And this, they were writing it down. This happened with the tabi'een as well. The student of Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, he had a compilation, the Sahifa of Hammam bin Munabbih, Bashir ibn Nahik. Many of the tabi'een had compilations as well that they would write down from the Sahaba. So you can say at a broad level, this is the first stage of hadith compilation. Then thereafter, they started to organize it. So one thing is compiling, another thing is organizing it. So for example, we may be sitting in class and then we'll take a lot of notes. If somebody says that, okay, can I just take your notebook and publish it as it is? We'd say, no, I have to go through it. I have to organize the topics, things like that. So the second stage then is organizing based on masanid. So masanid means organizing it based on the sahabi who's narrating it. So this is a narration from Tabaqat ibn Sa'd. So there was a person named Abdul Aziz bin Marwan. Does anyone know anything about him? Maybe a famous son that he might have had. I think I saw somebody say it quietly. So his son is the Khalifa Umar bin Abdul Aziz. So the father of Umar bin Abdul Aziz, who is obviously a generation before his son, Umar bin Abdul Aziz, his name is Abdul Aziz bin Marwan. Marwan ibn al-Hakam, also one of the Umayyad Khalifas. So كتب إلى كثير ibn Murrah. Kathir ibn Murrah was a tabi'i who met 70 Badriyin. As it says over here, وَكَانَ قَدْ أَدْرَكَ بِحِمْ 70 بَدْرِيًا مِنْ أَصْحَابِ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وسلم. So skipping a little bit. فكتب إليه أن يكتب إليهما بما سمع من أصحاب رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم من أحاديثهم إلا حديث أبي هريرة فإنه عندنا. So Abdul Aziz bin Marwan wrote to a person named Kathir ibn Murrah, saying that, can you give me all the hadith of the different sahaba that you have, except I don't need the hadith of Abu Hurairah. And we know that's the most extensive, because I already have it. So we see that he already gathered a hadith based on the sahabi. Yeah. Okay. So he already had the compilation of Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, and then he was asking for the other sahaba. So we see that some jama of hadith happened based on masanid, based on the sahaba who are narrating it. To give us an idea, this probably happened based on their dates of death, which are around the year 80, 70, that type of thing. So this probably, the latest it could have happened is like the mid-70s, right? If not earlier than that. Okay, so we said that the first stage is just kitaba. Second stage is organizing based on masanid, the sahabi who's narrating it. The third stage is gathering a hadith of one topic. So now we can see that you can gather a hadith based on the sahabi. That can be one form of organization. You can gather it based on a topic. So we say babun min al-abwab. So Hasan al-Basri, rahimahullah ta'ala, how many of us are familiar with his name? All of us, I'm sure. So he gathered a hadith of ikhlas. Sha'bi, he was Amir bin Sharahil al-Sha'bi, passed away in the year 108. Hasan al-Basri in the year 110. He gathered a hadith of talaq. So we see that they gathered a hadith of topics. Now keep in mind, if Hasan al-Basri is passing away in 110, Sha'bi passing away in 108, so around the same time. And then it's very likely that they weren't necessarily gathering it in the final year of their life. So now we see that the ishkal is that hadith were compiled after 200 years, maybe the year 200, maybe the year 250. But already we see that, first of all, it happened, kitaba happened in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This, we said, the general year, the latest it could have been is around the year 70. Obviously, we see a big difference between this, 200 and 250 in the year 70. Okay, we see ahadith were gathered based on topic. Then later on, Umar bin Abdul Aziz, who's, of course, we know a Khalifa. He was Khalifa from the year 99 to 101. He wrote to different scholars. He wrote to kataba ila al-afaq. He wrote to different scholars in various regions in the Islamic world. So he wrote to Ibn Shihab al-Zuhri. There's a little bit of kalam in this sanad though. He wrote to Amr bin Abdul Rahman, Abu Bakr bin Amr bin Hazm. He wrote to Qasim bin Muhammad bin Abi Bakr. He wrote to all of these people and he said, can you gather a hadith? And they all gathered their hadith and they gave it to him. So already this is happening definitely about 100 to 150 years before what they're saying. And then finally, then we see that this is gathering a hadith together, and he's writing to these various scholars around the Muslim world. And finally, we see that people began gathering a hadith of specific topics. This is from Imam Suyuti's Alfiya. أول جامع الحديث والأثر ابن شهاب آمرا له عمر. So the first one was Ibn Shihab az-Zuhri, as we just said, that Umar bin Abdul Aziz told him that he's supposed to compile a hadith. وَأَوَّلُ الْجَامِعِ لِلْأَبْوَابِ جَمَاعَةٌ فِي الْعَصْرِ ذُو اقْتِرَابِ. The first people to compile based on topic, many topics. So we said people that compiled based on a single topic, that's Hasan al-Basri, Sha'bi. People to gather many topics together. It was a group that were around the same time. كابن جريج وهشيم ومالك ومعمر وولد المبارك. So he mentions a few people, Ibn Jurayj, Hushaym, Imam Malik, others like that, Ma'mar, Ibn al-Mubarak. They all gathered a hadith of various topics. And all of them are, of course, well before the 250 year mark. So what we see is that this whole idea is that a hadith were compiled 250 years later. It's just completely erroneous. And then the idea is that it's based on something that's a very rudimentary understanding. But if we have to actually look into it a little bit more, we'll realize that there's many different stages of compilation. And then either way, it happened way before that. So if someone says that we can't rely on hadith because it was compiled so much later, then we'll say that, well, that's simply just a misconception. Any questions on this part? Okay. So moving on. There's another similar ishkal, that the sanad only started much later. Okay, so they say that the sanad didn't happen from the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or you can say his sahaba. The sanad actually started only much later. So there's a statement in the Muqaddimah of Sahih Muslim where Muhammad ibn Sirin, who is a great tabi'i, does anyone know something that he was known for? What was he famous for? Dream interpretation, right. So Muhammad ibn Sirin, amongst other things, but that's the thing he's most famous for. He says that we wouldn't ask about the isnad. فَلَمَّا وَقَعَتِ الْفِتْنَةِ قُلْنَا سَمُّوا لَنَا رِجَالَكُمْ. When the fitna occurred, then we said that سَمُّوا لَنَا رِجَالَكُمْ, state for us your sanad, basically, whoever you got the hadith from. So people say that, well, Ibn Sirin is saying this. He says that we started asking about the sanad when the fitna happened. So that's when we started asking about the sanad. So they say, see, the sanad didn't exist before the fitna, and so that's why the sanad is just a later invention. People didn't know about the sanad before. Does anyone have any guess what fitna is Muhammad ibn Sirin talking about? He doesn't specify himself. فَلَمَّا وَقَعَتِ الْفِتْنَةِ. Does anyone know? You can take a guess, maybe. Yeah. The fitna of wada' al-hadith. Do we have like a general year era that we can tie that to? Okay. Anyone else? That's good, mashallah, very good. So one thing that people say is that there's two main options that people give. One is the fitna of the maqtal of Sayyidina Uthman radiyallahu anhu. Does anyone know when that happened approximately? The year 35. Oh, okay. Okay, I think you were going to say it? Okay. Sorry? 35 Hijri, exactly, mashallah. So it happened in the year 35, radiyallahu anhu. So that was the big fitna that first happened, right? So then some people say that's when it was. Ibrahim al-Nakhi has a statement that he says that that's when the fitna was that Muhammad ibn Sirin was talking about. Other people say it was another fitna that happened a little bit later than that. A little after the year 60, in the early 60s, there was a person by the name of Mukhtar bin Abi Ubaid al-Thaqafi. Right? Has anyone heard the name before? Fitna of Mukhtar. So basically, long story short, after the maqtal of Sayyidina Hussein radiallahu anhu, the shahada of Sayyidina Hussein bin Ali radiallahu anhu, he said that he started his own group called the Tawwabun, saying we're very sad over the maqtal of Sayyidina Hussein. But then they basically went off, and then he claimed all sorts of things. And then he got his own group of followers, and then he was known to be al-Kadhab, a liar. So then some people say that's the fitna. So we can see that Muhammad ibn Sirin, he's talking about a fitna, saying the sanad started from that time. It could either be the year 30-something, 35, or it can be the year 60-something. Okay? So what the objection is of the Western critics is they say that two objections. So one of them is that we can't trust hadith because it was only documented 250 years later. We already saw, is that a valid objection or not? It's not a valid objection. Then they say, okay, well, maybe we can trust it sort of because we don't have a response to what you're saying, but the sanad we can't trust because the sanad only started after the fitna. And they say the fitna was the second one, the year 60-something. So then now, based on that, they say that we can't trust anything because if it only started after that time, then people didn't know the sanad before that time. Does everyone understand this? That's the idea. So then that means that pretty much anything before that year, we won't know what it is. Okay, one more attempt. Okay, so anyway, so in short, what we'd say to this is that either way, it's ihda al-husnayn. If we say the sanad, if we say the fitna that Muhammad ibn Sirin was talking about, فَلَمَّا وَقَعَتِ الْفِتْنَةِ قُلْنَا سَمُّوا لَنَا رِجَالَكُمْ, if it happened earlier on in the 30s, then that means that the process of documentation became more rigorous at an earlier stage. So that's a good thing. If we say the whole idea of authentication happened earlier on, that's good. Sorry. Okay, it's not reaching the back. Okay. Okay. So if the process happened earlier, then that's a good thing. And now if the process happened later, let's say the year 60 something, then is there anything good about that? Can anyone think of anything? Well, that means then people had salah and sidq for a longer time. So is that a good thing or a bad thing? Yeah, it's not a bad thing, it's a good thing. So anyway, so either way, first of all, I mean, this is just kind of an ilzami thing, not a tahqiqi thing. But either way, what we'll say is that it's not a bad thing, whether it's earlier, whether it's later. But then now they contend, the Orientalists contend that this was only the later thing in the year 60 something with the fitna of Mukhtar. So they say that this is when it started, so then we can't trust the sanad. So we'll say that first of all, this is a fundamental, you can say this is a logical fallacy. Does anyone remember what the statement of Ibn Sirin was? What did he say? The last part of it at least, yeah. Until the fitna, and then after the fitna, then what happened? We started to ask about it, exactly. So does Ibn Sirin say no one kept track of the sanad? Does he say that? No. What does he say? We just wouldn't ask about it generally. Right? Does everyone understand that? Okay. So then now that's a logical fallacy then to extend that to say that that means that no one knew about it. Okay? So Ibn Sirin is saying that we wouldn't ask about it. That's one point. Another point, this is more of an ilzami thing, but how do we know about Muhammad ibn Sirin's statement? Well, there's a sanad that goes up to it, right? So if we say that we're going to reject every narration that we find based on this one narration of Ibn Sirin, well, how do we know about that narration? Through the same process that we know about every other narration. So we say every other narration is false. The only one narration that's true is this one. And that's the only one we're going to believe, and we're going to use it to reject everything else. So can anyone tell me, is this academically honest or not? Obviously not. Right? And it's just, it doesn't make sense to say this is the one narration that happens to be true. Oh, got it. Jazakallah khairan. Jazakallah khairan. Okay. So alhamdulillah, jazakumullah khairan for that. Okay, just I'm going to pull one thing up and then inshallah we'll just display that. You sent it to, Is it to Yousuf G123? Okay. No, I didn't get it. Maybe it didn't come through. Okay, that's fine. Yeah, it's fine. We'll just skip that. No, I don't want to download the thing. Maybe, does it have it? Okay. Okay, I got it. Yeah. Okay, I think I got it. Yeah, okay. So that's coming. Inshallah. Okay, so back to what we were saying. Did the concept of sanad only start later? We said one, there's a couple of ilzami jawabs. The first thing is that if you say it's the second one, then how do we know about that? We know that about that through the sanad. So it doesn't really make sense to use that to reject everything else because that would be circular logic. The second thing is that we said it's also a logical fallacy to say that, well, the fact that he's saying we didn't ask about it means that we didn't know it. Okay, all of us know that, let's say that there's something that's generally known amongst us, something that all of us know. Okay, like for example, we know, I don't know, who the speaker is going to be for Jummah or something like that, or we know that there's someone that's going to be there, everyone acknowledges it. But then it's just, let's say that, alhamdulillah, everything is always smooth in whatever the masjid is. So we never ask, like, who are you going to get for Jummah, right? For example. But then let's say one time there's a speaker who makes some mistakes. So then thereafter, then we say, okay, well, okay, make sure that you get the right person for Jummah as a khatib, and make sure that you don't get somebody who makes mistakes. So I want to know who the khatib is. So it doesn't mean that all the past weeks we didn't know who the khatib was. We knew who they were. It's just that we weren't asking. So to say that Ibn Sirin's statement means that we wouldn't know about it, that's not what he said. He says that we wouldn't ask about it. And the next aspect is this. So who are most of the hadith narrated by? The hadith are mostly narrated by these sahaba over here, the ashabul uluf. And we'll talk about this a little bit more later. That should be big enough. So we see that these are the sahaba who narrated the most hadith. Sayyidina Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, can anyone tell me how many hadith he narrates? It's right there on the screen. 5,374. Sayyidina Abdullah bin Umar radiallahu anhu, 2,630. Anas ibn Malik radiallahu anhu, 2,286. Sayyidina Aisha radiallahu anha, 2,210. Like that. Okay? So then all of these people, these sahaba radiallahu anhum, they all narrate many, many hadith, over 1,000. And the bulk of a hadith are actually narrated through these sahaba. Now let's look to see when did these sahaba radiallahu anhum pass away? 57 for Sayyidina Abu Hurairah, right around that year 60. Okay, Abdullah bin Umar radiallahu anhu, when did he pass away? 73 or 74. Anas ibn Malik radiallahu anhu, 93, 92. Sayyida Aisha radiallahu anha, 57. Abdullah bin Abbas radiallahu anhu, 68. So what do we notice about all of these? Even if we take that fitna, ala sabil al-tanazul, even if we take that fitna to be the year 60, then what do we notice about all of these sahaba radiallahu anhum who narrate the majority of all the hadith? All of them are right around that 60 mark, or actually after that, right? So now let's say that, and who's narrating it from the tabi'in? So now if they're, basically just one step, just a sahabi. So how are they not going to remember the sahabi that they had it from when it's really at that mark anyway? When that's, according to them, when the process of verification occurred, right? So in short, the question was that we can't trust any sanad because the concept of sanad only happened post year 60. We say that there's a few jawabs to this. One of them is that, an ilzami jawab is that, how do you even know of that statement? That statement itself is through a sanad, so you shouldn't be able to trust that either. Another thing is that Ibn Sirin is saying we wouldn't ask about it. He doesn't say we didn't know it. And the third thing is that even then, all the Sahaba radiallahu anhu who narrate majority of the hadith, all of them passed away radiallahu anhum ajma'in after that time. So, or right around that time. So then really there's no basis for the ishkal. Okay, so this is the first thing we wanted to talk about. Thereafter we're going to... Yeah. Are there any questions on this part? Inshallah, feel free if you can just put up your hand and ask, inshallah, if there's anything. Yeah.
Could you mention the fifth stage?
Sure. The fifth stage of hadith compilation is, let me put it in viewing mode, is compiling a hadith of many topics in one place. Okay, so we discussed the third stage being compiling a hadith of a single topic. And then the fourth stage is what Umar bin Abdul Aziz rahimahullah ta'ala did. The fifth stage is compiling a hadith of many topics together. Right? So then pretty much like what we'll see in Muwatta Imam Malik, or even something like Sahih al-Bukhari or something, there's many topics together. Tahara, Salah, Zakat, things like that, all of them are together. So that's the fifth stage. And we can see naturally things progress organically, so we're not going to expect something that's as polished in the early stages, the times of Sahaba and Tabi'in, but rather as things progress, then they become a little bit more, just polished and crystallized. Right? Anything else? Yeah. Okay. So with that stated, inshallah, then what we'll do is that we'll try to go over some of the main things related to sanads. And let's see what time, 10:50. Okay. So with this, It's not going to be, inshallah, too difficult. We'll go through just a few things, inshallah. But the idea is that with these few pointers, inshallah, we'll be able to hopefully understand a lot. And then what we'll do is that we'll take out some ahadith from Bukhari, Muslim, Tirmidhi, etc. Or, just whatever we can. And then we'll try to see what we can identify. Okay? So basically what we'll do is that, so our general steps that we'll take forward from here is basic steps to understanding asanid. So the first thing that we'll discuss is the concept of a madar, what a madar is. Let me turn on the pointer. And then try to understand a little bit about madars. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second thing is that we'll look for, actually after madar, we'll look for sahaba. I didn't write that here, but we'll look for the common sahaba and their students. That'll be very easy. Then we'll look at common shuyukh of each of the authors. And then also sanads from the author going upwards. So pretty much what we'll do is we'll look at the middle. Okay, that's this part. We'll look at the end, the sahabi and their students. And then we'll look at the beginning, the shuyukh. And then if we just focus on the most common ones, we don't need to look at all 8,000, 9,000, then what will end up happening is that everything will sort of just click together. So give an example. If I'm giving a khutbah or something, I may be just walking up to the stage and I say, okay, in the khutbah, I want to quote this hadith. Then what I'll do is I'll say that I want to quote this hadith. I should probably quote it with the sanad as well. My local masjid is Salafi masjid, so it's just nice to have the sanad as well. So I do that. I try to quote hadith with the sanad. So all it takes is I just glance at it as I'm walking up. Hopefully I do it beforehand, but if I don't get a chance, I just glance at it as I'm walking up, and then I just look at it and say, okay, got it. I can quote it with the sanad as well. So that's not necessarily an act of brilliance. Rather, all it is that if you just identify key features, you identify the key features and then everything just falls into place after that. So it may be that we know several people on a sports team. And if you know a particular sports team, someone will say that this player passed it to this player, passed it to this player. Then it's very easy to remember those types of things. And then even if somebody just said that once and say, oh, tell me what happened in the play, you'll say that this is what happened. This player passed it, this player, and you'll be able to say all of the names. Now, how is it that we know that? It's because we're just familiar with the names, right? And if you're familiar with the names already, then, it's not hard to remember it. So what we need to do then is all we do is we familiarize ourselves a little bit with some of these names, and then inshallah it becomes very easy. So then what we're going to discuss right now, there's some printouts as well. I don't know if anybody has them. If so, then inshallah you can just feel free to look at that. And that'll also, it basically contains the same information, inshallah. Okay, so with that stated, inshallah, and this will hopefully be a little bit interactive. Inshallah, we request that everyone, inshallah, just participate and follow along. So the first thing to understand is the concept of madars. So now what we have over here is, okay, so the Madarul Isnad. So the famous scholar of hadith, the teacher of Imam Bukhari, Ali ibn Madini, he says that نظرت فإذا الإسناد يدور على ستة. I looked and I saw that most hadith go through 6 people. And he mentioned those 6 people. Ibn Shihab al-Zuhri from Medina, Amr ibn Dinar from Mecca, A'mash and Abu Ishaq al-Sabi'i from Kufa, Yahya ibn Abi Kathir from Basra, and Qatada from Basra. He says that most of these sanads go through these 6 people. So now that means that, now he's just saying this based on his khibra, based on his experience. But now when we actually go through and count the sanads and the number, the frequency of each narrator, we'll see that really it's the case that most of the sanads go through these people. So if we just focus on these people, then we'll see what the utility is. To just go back a little bit. Okay. So now, okay, so let's look at this. The idea is that, here. Oh, it's not working. Okay. So now these are the total number of ruwat in Sahih Bukhari. Can everyone see? Yeah, it's a little bit small. It's a little bit too big. Let's see. Yeah, this is the most. I can zoom out. But okay. So this is the total number of ruwat in Sahih Bukhari, not the total number of hadith. Yeah. Yeah. So this is the total number of narrators in Sahih Bukhari is 1,525. Not the total number of hadith, that's over 7,000, just the total number of narrators. Now, how many of them are the madaris? Do we see this little slither on the pie? Right. So madaris are just like 6 or 7. So now, what portion is at 6 or 7 of the 1,525? Pretty much almost nothing, right? So that's one thing. Okay, now going to this one, the share of the madaris in Sahih Bukhari. Looking at this, what is the total number of the shares of the madaris? So there's 6 or 7 people. In Sahih Bukhari, it accounts for about, as we can see over here, 34%, about a third or more than that of all of what's in Bukhari. So that means that if we just memorize those 6 names, those 7 names, and just familiarize ourselves with the sanads, that means that at least every third hadith will be able to say something about, if not more than that, right? So that seems like a pretty good deal, right? That's one thing. Now going back to this. What about Imam Tirmidhi? To take another example. So the total number of shuyukh of Tirmidhi is 221. Okay, total number of shuyukh that he has. Okay. Now, the top 10, obviously 10 of 221, as we can see over here, it's not so much. But now those 10 people, just 10 shuyukh, they constitute 69%, about 70% of the hadith in Sunan al-Tirmidhi. And then you can do this for any of the books, and then it is in some of the charts that, inshallah, in the printouts. So that means that these 10 people, it's not much. You may say learning 221 names, that's too much for me, I can't do that. That's fine. But 10 names is probably easy. Maybe that's the number of people we may have in our class, for example. So that's pretty easy for us to do. And if those 10 people will constitute about 70%, 2/3, more than that, that means that if you just learn these 10 names, then that'll constitute, majority of what you read. So every single hadith that you read, then you'll be able to, at least 2 out of every 3, you'll be able to say something about that. Oh yeah, I know this. So for example, for me, when I studied Dawra, if somebody asked me at the end of Dawra that, okay, can you name, you just read Bukhari, you read Tirmidhi, Abu Dawud, whatever, can you name 10 or 5 of the teachers of Tirmidhi or Abu Dawud or Bukhari? I would probably not be able to, because I was going in with the perspective that it's too much for me to learn. How can I learn any of it? But then had I thought about it differently, saying that, well, it's only just a few of them who constitute majority, then I'd be able to say, yeah, pretty much I just learned these few names, and then every hadith almost, I'll be able to say something about that, yeah, I know who this is coming from. Right? So all it takes is just knowing these big pieces, and then, which isn't a lot of information, and then you'll be able to learn a lot from that. So we see that sort of the utility of this idea. So moving on. So the idea is the madars. Up till this point, are there any questions? Okay. So the idea of the madars, the madar al-isnad. So we said Ali al-Madini, rahimahullah ta'ala, says that nadaratu fa idha al-isnadu yaduru ala sitta, that the sanad basically goes through these 6 people. So these 6 people are. So inshallah we can just note down these names, and we'll try to practically memorize some of them. Okay, the first one, not necessarily in any order, is this big green thing in the middle, Amr ibn Dinar. Can everyone say that? Right, he was from Mecca. So that's one name that we can just note down, Amr ibn Dinar. The next one is Qatada bin Di'ama. I'm sure all of us are familiar with the name Qatada. Did anybody hear his name in any other context? Where else do we hear Qatada's name? Tafsir, right. We hear his name if you read Ibn Kathir, you read anything like that, you see Qatada's name quite a lot. So Qatada is another one. Another one is Yahya ibn Abi Kathir. Can everyone say that? So maybe his name is a little bit less common, but that's okay. We have A'mash. His real name is Sulaiman ibn Mihran, but just A'mash is what he's known by. Has anyone heard that name before? A'mash. Okay. And then the 5th one is Abu Ishaq as-Sabi'i. Okay, can everyone say that? And finally, we're missing one. Oh, there we go. Imam az-Zuhri. Okay, everyone can say Zuhri. Also known as Ibn Shihab or Ibn Shihab az-Zuhri, Muhammad al-Muslim. Okay, so these are the 6 names we need to know. Just as the most common of all of them is Zuhri, so we'll focus on this one. So what we can do right now is that we know that these are the common people. There's some Sahaba in the middle. But anyway, these are the common madars. So they are Amr ibn Dinar, Qatada, Yahya ibn Abi Kathir, A'mash, Abu Ishaq as-Sabi'i, and Imam al-Zuhri. So these are the 6 names. So what I want all of us to do is that, inshallah, we can note down these names. Everyone can have maybe 30 seconds to memorize it, and let's see how many people can say those 6 names, inshallah, in the next 30 seconds. 1 minute. Okay? I'll just go through them one more time. Feel free to note it down. You have Amr ibn Dinar, okay? Qatada, Yahya ibn Abi Kathir, A'mash, Abu Ishaq al-Sabi'i, and finally, az-Zuhri. Okay, 6 names, inshallah. Just please, inshallah, you already noted it down. Let's just take 30 seconds, inshallah, and let's see who can say it after that. Okay, does anyone think that they can say it? The 6 names? You want to try? Yeah, go ahead. And then, okay, how about this? So we'll hear one person say it or a couple of people. Can everyone try to say it to the person next to them? Yeah? Okay, everyone, inshallah, we can try to do that. Everyone's going to be waiting for the other person to say it, but okay, let's do that first. Let's hear them out after we hear them out. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Just
Yeah.
sometimes.
Okay.
I know you believe that Allah is bigger than the issues.
Okay. Okay. Is there anybody who can say it? Yeah. Inshallah. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. Right. I think that was 6. Yeah. Very good, mashallah. And of course, the sisters are requested to say it to one another, inshallah. Again, the sisters are requested to say it to one another too. Okay, let's hear one more person say it. Any brave soldier. Yeah. Good. Uh-huh. Zuhri, right. Very good, mashallah. Very good. Let's hear maybe one more person. Yeah. Did I see any hints? Yeah, go ahead. Uh-huh. Right. Right. Uh-huh. Right. Zuhri, very good, mashallah. Okay. So, okay, very good. Yeah.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So just before moving on, I wanted to just ask again, mashallah, we're learning all of these names, the names of these narrators who are known as madars of asanid. Can someone just remind me, like, what's the purpose? Who cares? Like, why are we even memorizing these names? What significance does it have? Mawlana did discuss this, so let's just have a very brief recap before we go forward. Can anyone share? Like, really, like, what's the point? Yes. Exactly. So the whole purpose of this presentation is, again, to make the sanad understandable. we can't memorize all the names, but if we review the asani, then you put all of them on one plane, then you can see that there are certain names that truly stand out that are found in almost all the asanid. This is exactly what a madar is. There's such amazing narrators that were extremely prolific. And so if you were to just memorize these few names, then 30% of what you're reading, you'll be able to detect one individual in the sanad. So we can't memorize all the different independent names. But if you memorize these few, then there will be very few asanid that you pass by, except that you'll be able to comment on it. So keep that in mind, subhanAllah. There's a tabaqa of the sahaba, then the shuyukh of the teachers, and then there's someone in the middle. So if you like Mawlana Yousuf showed you on the graph, can we just go quickly back to the graph? So if you go to the graph here, it's so amazing actually, the amount of, it's the amount of thought that went into this. You'll see just understanding one set of narrators. So this is not the one on Bukhari. Yeah, the Madal one. So these 6 names that we memorized, if you were to look at all the narrations of Sahih Bukhari, there's 7,500. From them, about almost 3,000, almost half of the asanid are such that you'll be able to find one of these names. Half of them. So that means half of the narrations of Bukhari, you will understand the middle of the sanad. Then, if you go back to then there's another part of the sanad, the beginning, the shuyukh of the 6 authors. There are just 10 here. If you look in any book and you read the biographies of these muhaddithun, they had thousands of teachers. But if you were to look and examine them, you will see that from amongst all their teachers, there are some that really stand out above others. Take, for example, the top 10 shuyukh of Imam Tirmidhi. These are the 10 most influential teachers, you could say. And if you just memorize those 10 names, you will be able to know over, subhanallah, the total ahadith are 3,156. Look at how many. You'll be able to know more than two-thirds of the kitab. Approximately, almost 2/3 of the kitab. If not, it's definitely more than half. 69%, subhanallah. More than two-thirds. 69. Just memorizing 10 names. Just 10 names, and you'll be able to comment on more than 2/3 of the kitab as far as the sanad is concerned. Just 10 names. And then imagine if you did that for every single kitab. You just took the 10 most prolific narrators, and then you memorized the madars, and then you memorized the most prolific sahaba. Every sanad that you come across, illa masha'Allah, you'll be able to comment on. And that's exactly what Mawlana Yousuf has put together, and that's also what Mawlana Muhammad Abbas Umar Hafidhullah has put together. This is known as like taqribul asanid, to try and make this, to revive this fun, to revive this science, and enable us to begin learning about it. So these 6 names that inshallah by now everyone has memorized, when we're studying Dawratul Hadith now, you'll see in almost every single sanad. And then therefore you'll begin to understand the chains more. This whole fun of ilm al-Rijal will begin to slowly make sense.
Slowly make sense, or maybe even quickly make sense. Okay, so going back to what we were talking about, we have the 6 madaris. Before we go into specific ones, can I request everyone again, just one time, to recite the 6 names to the person next to you? And if you can't get through all 6, if you don't remember, just however many, maybe you remember 3. At least that's a start. Can everyone do that? The sisters, inshallah, can do it as well. Quite a bit good. Quite a bit. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so now let's go on. Okay. So with that stated, inshallah, Jazakallah khairan to everyone for your very, alhamdulillah, appreciated participation. So what we'll do is that now we'll look at this. We'll look at the madaris and we'll take Zuhri for example. Okay? And then we'll try to memorize some sanads from Zuhri going upwards. Then we'll memorize Zuhri's most common students. Okay? So now what I want everyone to do, so it's on the board and then inshallah some of us should have the packets as well. There's one packet that says Madarul Isnad, so feel free to just take a look at that. There should be a chart for Zuhri. Yeah, if any one person can just hold it up if you found the page, the one that says Zuhri, the same one on the screen, then yeah, we'll know where it is. Yeah. Yeah, so inshallah, that's fine. Okay, so now everyone can look at this either on the screen or if you have the packet in front of you. And what we'll do is that we'll say, okay, how does Zuhri, rahimahullah ta'ala, what are his sanads going upwards, meaning going to the Sahaba? So we see that Zuhri, rahimahullah ta'ala, narrates from Sayyidina Anas ibn Malik radiallahu an. Can everyone see that? Zuhri an Anas. So that's one portion of a sanad, Zuhri an Anas. Another one is Zuhri an Sa'id ibn Musayyib an Abi Hurairah radiallahu anhu. Does anyone know anything about Sa'id ibn Musayyib? Anything about him? Has anyone heard the name before? Right, Sayyid al-Tabi'in, he was the foremost of all the Tabi'in, piety, knowledge, everything like that, mashallah. So Imam Zuhri from Sa'id ibn Musayyib and Abi Hurairah. So the way that we learn this is with Zuhri and Sa'id, or Sa'id ibn Musayyib and Abi Hurairah. Then there's another person, Abu Salama ibn Abdurrahman ibn Auf. So how many people have heard of this name before? Okay, maybe a few of us. How many people have heard of the father, Abdurrahman ibn Auf? Okay, I'm sure all of us. Can anyone tell me something about his father, radiyallahu anhu? All of us know this. Please, someone say it. Abdurrahman, yeah, he was from the Ashad al-Mubashara, Abdurrahman ibn Auf, radiyallahu anhu. And what was his defining quality? He was, what did he say, sir? I think I heard someone say it. Very wealthy, but not just that, but what did he do with his wealth? He was very generous, right? So that was his defining quality. He was very generous, right? So this is his son, Abu Salama ibn Abdurrahman ibn Auf. A'raj. So now the way that we do this is with Zuhri and Sa'id ibn Musayyib and Abi Hurairah. Zuhri and Abi Salama ibn Abdurrahman and Abi Hurairah. Zuhri and al-A'raj and Abi Hurairah. Right? So that's how we learn that. And then now Zuhri going to Abdullah ibn Umar. Zuhri and Salim and Ibn Umar. Has anyone heard the name Salim before? Does anyone know who Salim is? Okay, can anyone tell me something about him? He's the son of Abdullah ibn Umar, right? So Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhu has two main narrators. One is Salim, his son. The other one is, does anyone know? Nafi', yeah, his Mawla, right. So Salim and Nafi'. So Zuhri and Salim and Ibn Umar. That's another sanad. And now this one should be easy too. Zuhri and Urwa and Aisha radiallahu anha. That's another sanad. Does anyone know about Urwa ibn Zubayr? What relationship did he have with Sayyidah Aisha radiallahu anha? Nephew, right? So then his mother was who? Asma bint Abi Bakr, who was the sister of Sayyidah Aisha. So Sayyidah Aisha radiallahu anha was his khala. So we say Zuhri and Urwa and Aisha. Zuhri an Abi Salama and Aisha. This is the same Abu Salama ibn Abdurrahman, same person. And Zuhri an Amra and Aisha radiallahu anha. She was a very prominent student of Sayyidah Aisha, Amra bint Abdurrahman. And there's also Zuhri and Ubaidullah ibn Abdullah and Ibn Abbas. You know what, for the sake of time, let's just focus on these first four. Okay? So what we're going to do is everyone can take, inshallah, 2-3 minutes to memorize this, and then we'll say it to one another, inshallah, but first we'll memorize it. So, yeah.
Before going forward, again, when you look at this chart, just keep this in mind. When you look at this chart, whatever information that's being given right now is what's the most common amongst all asani that you will see. So if you look at even the line of Sahaba radiallahu anhum, can we go back to that chart? I don't know where. If you look at the Sahaba that are the Ashab al-Uluf.
Oh, yeah.
So if you look at the Sahaba radiallahu anhum that are on the chart of Zuhri or on all the other charts for that matter, then you will see that these are the most prolific Sahaba of all time when it comes to narrating ahadith. In other words, there are no other Sahaba who narrate more than these 7 Sahabas. So Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu is the most prolific Sahabi of all time when it comes to narrating ahadith. When it comes to whose ahadith we have recorded before us, Take any compilation, any musnad, any book of atraf, and if you were to look and check how many narrations are there, Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu will always be on top. Then you find below him is Abdullah bin Umar, Anas ibn Malik radiallahu anhu is next. And then all of these 7, these are the only 7 that narrate more than 1,000 narrations. There are no other Sahaba whose narrations have been compiled that we have today, which report more than 1,000 narrations. So these are the only 7. That's why they're known as Ashabul Uluf. Now, if you quickly go back to this chart, the Zuhri chart, you guys can look at the Zuhri chart right now. I guess we can. Okay, go back to the Zuhri chart. Are those 4 Sahaba there who can just call them off right now? Just announce them. What are they for? Anyone? Anas ibn Malik radiallahu. Let's start with, is Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu there? Yeah, most prolific. Number 1, he's there. Okay. Then, is Abdullah bin Umar radiallahu anhuma there? Yes, he's there. He's the 2nd most prolific. Is Anas radiallahu anhu there? 3rd most prolific Sahabi. Is Aisha radiallahu anha there? 4th most prolific Sahabi. Is Abdullah bin Abbas radiallahu anhuma there? 5th most prolific. So in other words, these are the most common Sahaba. And if you were to check any book of hadith, those Sahaba who will have the most amount of hadith in those books would be amongst these Sahaba. Then, to make it even more interesting, these names of the Tabi'un that we have aren't just random names. They're not just random names. Can we actually go to the Mashahir Ruwat very quickly? They're not just random names, but rather there are chosen names. So in this chart here, you found, just like you would go through all the hadith to find the most prolific Sahaba, then Mawlana Muhammad Sahab went through all of the ahadith of Tuhfat al-Ashraf and other books, and you found from those Sahaba who are their most famous students. Okay, so they all have hundreds of thousands, of course they have hundreds of students, but who are the most prolific, the most the most important students who carried on their ahadith? You'll find amongst Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, in our Zuhri chart, there were 3. Who are the 3? Can someone call off the first 3, all 3 of them? One after another, let's check. Shout it out, anyone. What's on the chart?
Repeat the question.
When it comes to Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, then underneath him there are Tabi'un. Who are those Tabi'un? Who are his students? Number 1 is Sa'id ibn Musayyab. So on this chart here, we have from all of Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu's students, all of them, who have reported the most ahadith, whose names will be the most common in any book of hadith that you pick up. Illa masha'Allah. You'll find these few. Amongst them, we have Zuhri rahimahullah. He reports from, who's number 1? Sa'id ibn Musayyab. Is he on this list? Yes, he is. Sa'id ibn Musayyab, he's right there, number 1. Okay, then who else is on the list? Abu Salama. Is Abu Salama here, number 2? Who else is on the list? Al-A'raj, Abdurrahman ibn Hurmuz. Al-A'raj, he's over here. He's number 4 on the list. So there are a few others which you will see in the other charts that you have provided. But here, Zuhri rahimahullah, his narrations, you see many of them, they go via these 3 students, linking them up to Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu. So again, you're memorizing very little information compared to what exists. What all exists, there's so much. But if you just memorize these few charts, then you will now be able to understand majority of the asanid that you read. Subhanallah. So very quickly, you will begin to, not slowly, but very quickly, you'll begin to understand the asanid. This is just one sahabi. If you were to go through all, so this is a whole chart. See, Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, his most famous students. Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu, Anas radiallahu anhu, his most famous students. If you were to check Aisha radiallahu anha, who is the most famous students listed on your chart? Urwa bin Zubair. Let's check. Are they here? Urwa ibn Zubair. He's right here. Who else? Who?
Abu Salama.
Abu Salama. Okay, he's not on this chart. Who else? Amra binti Abdul Rahman. She's here on this chart. Subhanallah. So like that, if you check any sahabi who's here, majority of the time you will find that these madars have reported from their most famous students. So again, it's very little information. It's very few names that we're memorizing compared to the thousands that actually exist, less than 100. But then all of a sudden you begin to understand majority of the asanid that you come across. Subhanallah.
Oh, can you just mention Muyassirat?
I'll hold it. So alhamdulillah, this is a book. It's called Al-Muyassirat. Al-Muyassirat, what's it? لإدراك أسانيد الروايات. So Al-Muyassirat, certain things which make it easy لإدراك أسانيد الروايات, to begin to understand the asani, the various different narrations. So my Ustad Mawlana Muhammad Abbas Umar Hafidhullah, he put together this book with the intention of making it easy to understand asanid. And so again, Mawlana Yousuf also has a book which inshallah he will be publishing soon, inshallah, and you have a few pamphlets that he put together. So in the back, it is available for purchase, and it has many of these such charts that will make it easy to understand the asanid. Few names, but if you do put in the work, then subhanallah, very quickly you'll begin to understand the narration. So you can see them in the back also. We'll be using many of the charts.
Okay, so building on from that, if we look back at this chart that we're seeing over here, and then feel free to also, if you have it in front of you, you can look at it over there as well. We see Zuhri going upwards. Zuhri an Anas, Zuhri an Sa'id ibn Musayyab, an Abi Huraira, Zuhri an Abi Salama, an Abi Huraira, Zuhri an al-A'raj, an Abi Huraira. So what we can do, inshallah, in the next 2 or 3 minutes is that we'll just memorize Zuhri going upwards. If we can do all 5 of these Sahaba radiallahu anhum, great. If not, then maybe at least 3 or 4 of them, inshallah. Let's see what we can do. So the way that we do it is that we just look at it and we memorize it. And then we say, okay, how does Zuhri go to Anas ibn Malik? That's easy, Zuhri an Anas. We say, okay, the next Sahabi is Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu. How does Zuhri go to him? We say, okay, you're trying to recall, say, Zuhri an Sa'id ibn Musayyab an Abi Huraira, Zuhri an Abi Salam an Abi Huraira, Zuhri an al-A'raj an Abi Huraira. So then you try to remember it like that. How does Zuhri go to Ibn Umar? You say Zuhri an Salim an Ibn Umar. How does Zuhri go to Aisha radiallahu anha? Zuhri an Urwa an Aisha, Zuhri an Amra an Aisha, Zuhri an Abi Salam an Aisha radiallahu anha. So this is how it goes. So and same thing for Abdullah ibn Abbas if we can get that far. So let's try to take inshallah 2 or 3 minutes. Try to memorize it. It's there on the board. And right now we're just focusing on Zuhri going upwards. We're not focusing on anything else. Okay? And let's try to take the next 2 or 3 minutes to memorize it, and then we'll recite it to the person next to us, inshallah. So everyone, inshallah, can do that. Yeah, let's do that. I think we should just do that. Who are all the teachers? Huh? Yeah. And maybe Turak as well. Yeah, whoever you know. Okay. How many people are done memorizing by show of hands? How many people need 1 more minute before we recite it to the people next to us? Okay, we'll do 1 more minute, inshallah. الله الذي لا إله إلا هو عالم الغيب والشهادة الرحمن الرحيم اللهم لا إله إلا هو. Okay, so inshallah we can start saying it to the person next to us, inshallah, and then afterwards I'll ask a few of us to say it, inshallah.
Collection of those asani,
Which ones?
any like asani, to show them like.
The tatbiqan? I just didn't pull up Shami.
Oh, it's perfect. Yeah.
As well. Okay, so how many people have successfully heard it from the person next to them? Okay. If I said how many people have successfully recited, maybe everybody will be shy to say. How many people have successfully heard it from the person next to them? Okay, good. Alhamdulillah, we're seeing a few hands. Inshallah, the sisters can recite to one another as well. Okay, can anyone say it for us? Inshallah, just however much they can get through. Let's have one person do it. Is any volunteer? Any brave volunteer? You want it? Yeah, okay. It's just a little bit loud, please. Yeah, if you could just say it a little bit louder. Yeah. 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 Good. Okay. Mm-hmm. Uh-huh. Very good, mashallah. Very good. Can we get one more person to say it? One more brave person. And then amongst the sisters, one person can say it out loud to the other sisters and they can listen. Let's have one more person say it over here. Any one person? Okay, who can say at least two of them? Zuhri going to two different Sahaba. Can anyone say that? Yeah, okay, good. And amongst the sisters, one person can say it to the rest of the sisters, yeah. Mm-hmm. Right. Abu Salama, yeah. Right. Araj, good. Anas ibn Malik radiyallahu anhu, good. Good. right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Very good, mashallah. Ibn Abbas. Mm-hmm. Very good, mashallah, to Ibn Abbas. Very good, mashallah. Inshallah, hopefully some of the sisters said it as well. Now we did Zuhri going upwards. Let's look at Zuhri going downwards. So only just a little bit more of this, inshallah, and then we'll try to do some tatbiq. Okay, Zuhri going downwards. So all we'll do is we'll just look at this one tabaqa over here. Okay? So the first student of Zuhri and the most, you can say, the strongest or most famous student of Zuhri is Imam Malik ibn Anas. How many people have heard that name before? Okay, about half of us have heard Malik ibn Anas. Okay. Does anyone know anything about Imam Malik? Any one fact or two facts about him? Yeah? Imam Dar al-Hijra. Okay. Anything else? Has anyone heard of a madhab named after him? Maybe? Yeah, okay. So that's the same Imam Malik. So he's a student of Imam Zuhri. Okay, he's the author of a book. Does anyone know what that book is called? Muwatta. Okay, so all of us know him. I'm just saying this because only like about 1/3 or 1/2 of us raise our hands saying that we know him. Sufyan ibn Uyayna. Does anyone know? Has anyone heard the name before? Probably all of us have. Sufyan ibn Uyayna. Ma'mar bin Rashid. A little bit less common. Has anyone heard of Ma'mar? Maybe. Okay. Now the next two students are amongst the most prominent top students of Zuhri, Uqayl and Yunus. Usually you see their names together as well. Uqayl and Yunus. My personal favorite from the students of Zuhri is actually, in terms of his riwayah, strength of his riwayah, is Uqayl. And the last one, this is Shu'ayb bin Abi Hamza. Maybe his name is a little bit less common, but he is the most common student of Zuhri in Sahih al-Bukhari. So Shu'ayb bin Abi Hamza comes the most out of any of them in Sahih al-Bukhari, perhaps. He's known that his handwriting was so good, it was like considered like the best that anyone had ever seen. Shu'ayb bin Abi Hamza. So now what we'll do is that we'll try to learn Zuhri going downwards. Okay, so we have Malik. So can we all say it together? Malik, Sufyan ibn Uyayna, Ma'mar, there's Uqayl and Yunus, and finally Shu'ayb bin Abi Hamza. Okay, we'll say it one more time. Malik, Sufyan ibn Uyayna, Ma'mar, Uqayl and Yunus, and Shu'ayb bin Abi Hamza. Okay, I'll say it one more time and then I'm going to ask you to say it. Malik, Sufyan ibn Uyayna, Ma'mar, Uqayl and Yunus, and Shu'ayb bin Abi Hamza. Okay, does anyone think that they can say the students of Zuhri, the 6 of them? Okay. Take a moment to internalize it, then inshallah I'll ask.
Can you highlight the fact that they are min athbatin nas amongst all the students?
You can say it,
Before you memorize it, inshallah, to give a little bit more relevance, is that or more importance, these students again, there are like hundreds of other students. Why these? So these are known as min athbatin nas. Sometimes you may read Sunan al-Tirmidhi and you will see like wa huwa asahhu min fulan or huwa athbatu min fulan. So then a lot of times we'll skim over that, and sometimes we'll read other shuruhat of hadith and we will hear that this is ma'lul or this is mu'allal and this is asah or this is more reliable, and then we won't really understand why. But through the science of ilm al-Rijal, this is just like a first step, but through the science of ilm al-Rijal, then you begin to understand ilal of hadith. Then you begin to understand when a narration is considered shadh, or when a narration is considered asahhu ma warada fil bab, etc., etc., etc. So these, amongst all the hundreds of students that he has, these are considered the most reliable of all time. The most reliable of all time. And there's another chart in Al-Muyassirat on this. Min athbatin nasi anhu an fulan. So Imam Zuhri rahimahullah is on the right. This is the Shaykh. Who are his most prolific, or who are the most reliable students? You have Malik rahimahullah, Ibn Uyayna, Ma'mar, Yunus, Uqayl, Shu'ayb ibn Abi Hamza, and Ziyad ibn Sa'ad. Then Sa'id al-Maqburi, he has... Okay. So then you can see amongst all the students that are on your chart before you, or the chart that we're going over, you see Malik rahimahullah, is he there? Yes. Imam Malik rahimahullah, yes. Sufyan ibn Uyayna, is he there? Rahimahullah, yes. Ma'mar bin Rashid rahimahullah, is he there? Yunus ibn Uqayl Or Yunus ibn Yazid. Yunus ibn Yazid al-Ayli, rahimahullah, is he there? Uqayl ibn Khalid, is he there? Shu'aib ibn Abi Hamza, is he there? So subhanAllah, they're all there. And again, this is just one chart, but those names are not, they're not just like randomly placed there. These are the most reliable narrators from this madar. So again, their names will appear the most in the asani that you go over.
Okay. So just one more time. It's Malik, Sufyan ibn Uyayna, Ma'mar, Yunus, Uqayl, and Shu'aib ibn Abi Hamza. Does anyone think that they can say these 6 names? And I request also the sisters that someone can say it to, they can say it to each other. Okay, who can say these? Huh?
Let's have someone new.
Is there anyone new who can say it? No.
How many hufad are here?
Hafal al-Quran? Probably everybody.
Most are hufad.
Yeah.
Can you do it? It doesn't have to
No,
be
you
ordered.
don't. No, no order. You don't even need to say bin. That's fine. Yunus and one more. I said this one is my favorite. Okay, yeah. Okay, good. MashaAllah, very good. Okay, yeah. If we want to just do first names, that's good too. Okay, let's have one more person or 2 more people say it. Anyone? Okay, Mawlana. Shariff bin Abi Hamza. Very good, mashallah. That's one, mashallah. Let's get one more person. Anyone, one person? Sisters, again, I request that they say it to one another. Inshallah, every sister can say it to the person next to them. And one more person. Yes, go ahead. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Shu'aib, right? Uh-huh. Yunus, very good, mashallah. Okay. Yeah, and if you want to try to remember it, the name that's a little bit unfamiliar, maybe, or that's harder to remember, just think of a person that you know of that name, and just picture them, and then that'll help you remember it. Is there anyone named Yunus here? Okay, I guess that didn't work. Maybe we know a Yunus, so you can just picture that person. Okay, so now what we have is we have students of Zuhri, and we have teachers of Zuhri. And this is just one example. Of course, there's 6 madar, so we can extend it, but we won't do that together. And actually, Zuhri is the most common, and then it's probably the most complex as well. If we look at other ones, for example, Abu Ishaq as-Sabi'i, do we see anything? How does this compare to the chart of Zuhri? Is there less stuff or more stuff? Less stuff. Okay, good. We look at the chart of Qatada. Less stuff or more stuff? A lot less stuff, right? So if we can do Zuhri, which is the hardest, perhaps, then we can do any of the other ones because they're even easier. Can anyone memorize Qatada going to the Sahaba? Does anyone think that they can manage to do that? Okay. Can anyone tell us what it is? Qatada and Anas, that's all, right? That's very easy. The common students of Qatada, let's just do 3 instead of all 6, just to make it easy. They are the first 3. Shu'ba, Sa'id bin Abi Aruba, and Hisham al-Dastawai. Can we all say Shu'ba? Sa'id bin Abi Aruba, Hisham al-Dastawai. So then this, I actually went through the ruwat from Qatada in the various books. I counted all of them, and then I saw that, wow, this is actually, these are the most common students of Qatada. So then, and these are considered to be athbatun nasi anhu as well, the most reliable students as well. So we have Shu'ba, Sa'id bin Abi Aruba, Hisham al-Dastawai. So Qatada we already know. Zuhri is, we did. Qatada going upwards, can anyone tell me how it is? How does that go? Qatada and Anas. Can anyone tell me 3 students of Qatada? Shu'ba is one. What else? Sa'id bin Abi Aruba is another one. And the last one? Hisham al-Dastawai. Right. So we know Qatada going upwards and downwards too. There's 3 more, but these are a little bit less common. Not uncommon, but they're just less than the first 3. So let's just focus on this. So now what do we do with this? So one thing is that we learn the madars, which is what we're doing right now, and then the other charts are even easier. So that's something that we can try to do. We learn the madars. Then the ashab al-uluf from the sahaba, let's go back to that. These are very easy as well. All these names I'm sure we probably already are familiar with. Ashab al-uluf. So they are, even if we don't memorize the numbers right now, at least the names we should recognize. So who are the ashab al-uluf? Sayyidina Abu Huraira, Abdullah bin Umar, Anas ibn Malik, Sayyida Aisha, Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Abbas, Jabir bin Abdullah radiyallahu anhu, and Sayyidina Abu Sa'id al-Khudri radiyallahu anhu. That's all. Okay? So let's take, all of these names we already know. We can just take a few seconds and just try to familiarize ourselves with these and memorize these names. So let's try to memorize this list. Everyone can, inshallah, just take less than a minute and do it, then you can recite it to the person next to you as well. In your packets, there's actually not a chart for this, so you'll just have to see it from the board. And then even if you get the order wrong, no problem, as long as we just know the names. Make it bigger. Is it? Okay, can anyone say these names? Let's have everyone say it to the person next to them. Of course, sisters can do it as well to the person next to them. Okay, so who can say it out loud for us? Anybody? Yeah, go ahead. And the sisters, one person can say it out loud for the rest of them so the rest of the sisters can hear. Yeah, go ahead. Say it. Okay, good. MashaAllah. I think you got all 7, right? Yeah. Okay, let's have one more person say it. These are easy because these are all names that we know from hearing about the Sahaba radiallahu anhum. Anyone? These are the Ashab al-Uluf, meaning they have, as Mawlana Farhan stated, they have over 1,000 narrations, some of them 2,000, Abu Huraira even 5,000 radiallahu anhu. One more person can say the names, inshallah? Yeah. Good, alhamdulillah. Okay, so these are the Ashab al-Uluf from the Sahaba radiallahu anhum. So we're just going to wrap up soon, inshallah, almost done. So we did about the madaris going upwards and downwards. We did Zuhri in a little bit more detail. Qatada we did kind of fast, but we saw that the others are easy. Qatada very easy. Okay, now what we'll do is that we'll just look at one more aspect, which is the shuyukh. Okay? Okay, so if you could look at this, you see that it says, Ashharu shuyukhi ashab al-kutub al-sitta. So what this means is that, again, as we discussed before, we look at all the different shaykhs, and maybe it's a little bit hard to know. But then if we just take the top of them, so we see Imam Tirmidhi, for example, he has many shuyukh, but if you just take the top, I put 15 here, let's just take the top 10, for example. So how many ahadith does it constitute? Well, okay, the top 15. How many hadith does it constitute? Can anyone tell me what that number is? 3,122. Does anyone know how many hadith are in Tirmidhi? And then if you want to just take the top 10, take out the last few, it's about 3,000 or so if we want to take the top 10. How many hadith are in Tirmidhi? Does anyone know? It's about 4,000. So that means just the top 10 shuyukh constitute about 3,000 narrations. So that means that it's almost 3/4 of it. That's a lot. Okay, let's look at, Ibn Majah, same thing. Okay, again, this is 14. If you want to just make it easy, take the top 10. Again, So this would constitute above 3,000, right? 3,226. We want to shave off a few to make it just 10. Above 3,000 still. And how many ahadith are in Ibn Majah? Does anyone know? About 4,000. So again, this is about 3/4 of it. What about Bukhari? So top 15 shuyukh, or you can take top 10, whatever, 3,404 narrations. Does anyone know how many hadith are in Bukhari? A little over 7,000, 7,275. So that means that this is about half of that, isn't it? 3,500 to round it up. What happens when we double 3,500? 7,000. Right. So now this is very, very high yield. So then what we'll do then is that we'll just maybe we might just choose one and try to familiarize ourselves with some of the names. But just to explain how it works. So then we go through each of these charts, and most of you have the packets as well, and then you try to memorize these names, right? Maybe it might be a little bit more difficult than the other things because maybe these names are a little bit less familiar. But if we're in Dora or preparing for Dora or have done Dora already, then we would have passed over these names many times, so it won't be completely unfamiliar to us. So this is one aspect. So we memorize the shuyukh. So we can see it for each of the kutub al-sitta. Then after that, we have the jaddat, which means the routes of transmission, particularly from the shuyukh. So what we have over here, this is Sahih al-Bukhari. So now, this is Abdullah bin Yousuf at-Tinnisi. Let me get the laser pointer. There we can see. Okay, this is Abdullah bin Yousuf at-Tinnisi. Can everyone say that? Or Tinnisi. Okay. How many narrations does he have in Sahih al-Bukhari? What number is that, if anyone can see? Is it too small?
Yeah,
Oh, it's too small? Okay. I can't zoom in on this either. Okay, 340. If you have, most of you have it in your packets, so 340. Now, Tinnisi from Malik. So for my example, my own self, I studied Sahih al-Bukhari, and after I studied, if somebody asked me, okay, can you name some of the shuyukh of Bukhari, I probably wouldn't be able to. They say, okay, have you heard the name Abdullah bin Yousuf at-Tinnisi? I'd say, yeah, I think I have. I think I've heard it. I've read through it a number of times. They say, well, who does Tinnisi commonly narrate from? I would have no idea because I just never looked into it. But if you see this, it's in your packets and it's on the board, but maybe a little bit fuzzy. Abdullah bin Yousuf at-Tinnisi is narrating from Imam Malik. Now, Imam Malik, how many times does this come? Tinnisi from Malik. That number, if anyone has it in your pocket, can anyone tell us? 277. So reading over something 277 times, that's a lot, isn't it? Okay, if someone tells us if someone told me something 277 times and I still didn't remember it, then they would say, okay, what's wrong with you? You should remember it by now. That's a lot of times, right? Like if my mom told me to take out the trash 277 times and I still didn't do it, then she would say, okay, there's definitely a problem here. But that's exactly what was happening with me. So I read through Sahih Bukhari, so I definitely went through Tinnisi, Abdullah bin Yousuf at-Tinnisi from Imam Malik. I went over that 277 times, but it never clicked in my mind that, oh, Tinnisi, I guess, narrates from Malik. I guess it's happening a lot, because I was just never looking for it. But then now that we know that, hey, there are some common senads. So if you say, who is one of the most common shuyukh of Bukhari, you say, okay, Tinnisi, for example, Abdullah bin Yousuf at-Tinnisi. Who does he commonly narrate from? Imam Malik. Now, who can tell me then, what's something else that we learned about Imam Malik? Any other discussion that he came up in today? Anything else? I think I heard someone say it a little bit louder, please. A student of Zuhri. So we say, hey, wait a minute. That means that Abdullah bin Yousuf at-Tinnisi narrates from Imam Malik. And Malik is a student of Zuhri. And we know how to get from Zuhri back to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? Look at the next one. The next most common sanad, Abul Yaman. Abul Yaman narrates from Shu'aib. And Shu'aib's full name, we might not have memorized the last name, but does anyone know what Shu'aib's full name is? Can anyone say it? Shu'aib bin Abi Hamza. Does that sound familiar? Did we hear about that any other time today? What is the fact about him, Shu'aib bin Abi Hamza? Student of Zuhri. Right, handwriting too, that's good. But student of Zuhri. Okay, now Shu'aib bin Abi Hamza narrates from Zuhri. So how many times does he narrate from Zuhri? 202 times. So again, I was reading this in Bukhari over 200 times, but it just never clicked in my mind. But now this is coming a lot of times, right? Okay, Ali ibn Madini from Sufyan ibn Uyayna. Sufyan ibn Uyayna, does that name sound familiar? Where did we hear it before? Student of Zuhri. And then this is a chart we didn't do. He's also a student of Amr ibn Dinar, both of them. He's a student of both of them. If we just want to see that, we can see. The first one. We didn't see this, But the main student of Amr ibn Dinar, who's one of the Madaris, is Sufyan ibn Uyayna. Right? So same thing. Okay? So now going back to this, Sahih al-Bukhari. So we say that, okay, well, we have one portion, one of the jaddas of Sahih al-Bukhari is just, we can say Abdullah bin Yousuf at-Tanisi from Malik. Okay, how many people can memorize that much? Abdullah bin Yousuf at-Tanisi from Malik. Everyone take a moment, memorize it, and then someone can say it. That's all. It's just 2 pieces. Okay, who can say it for us? Anyone manage to memorize that? Any one person?
Some people find it difficult.
Okay, can one person say Abdullah bin Yusuf at-Tanisi and Malik? If anyone memorized that part? Okay, great, mashallah, we heard it. Can one more person say it? Yeah, okay, can you say it? Good, okay. Dora students, can you raise your hand if anyone's in Dora currently? Okay, one, okay, anyone else? Okay, now no one wants to raise their hand. I should have asked that at the beginning before they knew there were any questions. Okay, anyone else in Dora? Okay, can you say it? Good, okay. Now, another one. Abul Yaman and Shu'aib and Az-Zuhri. Okay, Dora students are studying Sahih al-Bukhari. How many people does this sound familiar to anybody? Again, probably after I say Sahih al-Bukhari, if anyone asked me, I'd say, no, I never noticed. They say, well, you read it 200 times, you didn't notice? I'm like, no, I didn't. I was focusing on the matan. But it's actually not so hard. So, okay. So, Abul Yaman and Shu'aib and Az-Zuhri. Let's try to memorize that. Okay, everyone say it with me. Abul Yaman and Shu'aib and Az-Zuhri. Say it one more time. Abul Yaman and Shu'aib and Az-Zuhri. Okay. Any of the Dora students, can anyone say that for me? Yeah. Good. Okay, now that we know this, and then there's many others as well, as you can see. Can anyone construct a sanad, just hypothetical sanad, from Imam Bukhari's teacher, Tinisi, back to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Who can do that? It's hypothetical. You don't have to have the matan for it or anything. Yeah, okay, in the back, if you can say it. And let's have the sisters, you guys can say it to one another, inshallah. Yeah. A little bit louder, please. Okay, he's saying Abdullah bin Yusuf at-Tanisi, okay. An Malik, okay, good. An Zuhri, okay. An Anas, very good, mashallah. He said Abdullah bin Yusuf at-Tanisi, An Malik, An Zuhri, An Anas radiyallahu anhu. Does that work? Yeah, so that works. Okay, can anyone construct another sanad for me? Yeah. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Very good. He's saying Abdullah bin Yusuf at-Tanisi and Malik and Zuhri and Amr and Aisha radiyallahu anha. Very good. Can anyone say one for me for Abul Yaman? Imam Bukhari says حدثنا أبو اليمان قال أخبرنا شعيب عن الزهري. So he uses a different sigha in each one. It's consistent. Every time you read through it, you'll see these 3 names. You'll see حدثنا أبو اليمان قال أخبرنا شعيب عن الزهري. So that's just how he does it. Anyone? Yeah, okay. Someone who hasn't said something yet? Yeah. Okay, let's just have him say this. Yeah, we'll go through the sentence. Yeah, I'll put that up there. Okay, yeah. Okay. So let's hear this. Just one more person say this. Sisters, I request they say to one another. Yeah, in the back? Yeah. Okay, very good, mashallah. Very, very good, mashallah. Okay. Now, so those of us who are in Dora, probably at the beginning of the year, we heard the story of Imam Bukhari, who was just a 10 or 11-year-old boy who went to the majlis of Imam al-Dakhili in Bukhara. Does anyone remember this? Has anyone heard this story before? The show of hands? Okay, one person. You're in Dora currently? Okay, that means everybody probably heard it in Dora, but you're the only one raising your hand. Okay, so I'm sure we must have heard it in our Bukhari class, maybe at the beginning of the year when we were starting. So Bukhari, rahimahullah ta'ala, was a 10 or 11-year-old boy. He went to the majlis of a big muhaddith named Imam al-Dakhili. Imam al-Dakhili is saying the sanad. He's saying Sufyan an Abi Zubayr an Ibrahim. And then Imam Bukhari, as a 10-year-old boy, he pipes up saying, Shaykh, Mawlana Sahib, whatever, Hazrat, I think that's a mistake. And he says, what are you talking about? And then how is a little boy here correcting the teacher? He says, it's not like that. So the teacher says, "Adakhili, so what is it?" He says, well, I think it's supposed to be Sufyan and Zubayr ibn Adi and Ibrahim. And then teacher says, what are you talking about? He said, just check your notes. He checked his notes and it was as Imam Bukhari said. So then they said, so then the teacher then corrected it. But then how did Imam Bukhari know that? Because he probably hadn't heard that hadith before, because he was going to the teacher to hear hadith he didn't know before. So part of it, perhaps the main thing, is that Imam Bukhari just understood how sanads work. And he was only a 10-year-old boy. Granted, he was a genius. But nevertheless, all he understood, in this thing, is just how they work. He knew that Sufyan, he's from Kufa. Then Abu Zubayr is from Mecca. Then from Ibrahim al-Nakhai, he's from Kufa. It just doesn't make sense. However, Zubayr ibn Adi, who's a similar name to Abu Zubayr, he's from Kufa. He's a student of Ibrahim. And then he's somebody that Sufyan narrates from. So he said, it can't be that Abu Zubayr, it has to be Zubayr ibn Adi. So he said, it's probably this one. He just understood, how could a person from Mecca be in between two people from Kufa? That doesn't make sense. So he said, it must be Sufyan and Zubayr ibn Adi and Ibrahim. So he just understood how it works. So now, how do we do that? So normally we hear that and we say, wow, that's crazy, he's amazing. That is true, he is amazing, mashallah. But if we just understand the basic pieces, then we start to put it together as well, and then everything can just click for us as well. So in short, what we'll do is that we'll just take this, and then, forgive me, but this is just Shamila. We'll just open up any hadith of Sahih al-Bukhari. Okay, just randomly. I'll just open up any hadith of Sahih al-Bukhari, and then we'll see if we can connect it to anything. Yeah.
So essentially, subhanAllah, that the utility for this, the scope of this knowledge is such that we can begin to understand the kalam of the muhaddithun when they say that this particular narration is mu'allal. We'll read it, this narration is mu'allal, but we make taslim. It is. These are our imams, of course. But what's going to happen now when Western academics, Orientalists, they begin saying things like, you Muslims don't even know anything about your faith. You're just reading it in a book and you're just accepting. What kind of knowledge is that? What answer do we have if we don't understand the way it works? But the knowledge is there. It does exist. But we have to equip ourselves. When you understand that this is just the beginning, but when you begin to understand ilm of ilal and you learn these jaddat, these famous asanid, you learn the madar, you learn the famous students, then very easily you'll begin to be able to, when you make takhrij, you put the asanid in front of you, and you see that one muhaddith is saying this particular chain is mu'allal, and if you view all the chains or you view who is inside of the chain, it'll begin to click. You will now be able to explain and show others how this field of ilal actually works. So this goes back to difa' an sunnah. We may think, and rightfully so, many of us have this in our minds, that what's the point? We're studying Sahih Bukhari, asahul kutub ba'da kitabillah, every hadith is sahih. Why do I need to know the people in the chain? Well, one is, yes, we need to acquaint ourselves with these are our leaders who pass down deen to us. We should understand and know who's there. But at the same time, it opens up a whole entire field of ilm al-hadith, which is otherwise slowly becoming extinct. And if that happens, then we open ourselves to severe criticism, and we are not prepared to answer. But if a person begins to master the science, then you are now protecting the deen, you're protecting the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So now Mawlana is going to go through a few asanid to show you, just over the few facts that you learned over just 1 or 2 hours, how much application is actually there when you're viewing the asanid right now.
So one thing to note is that, alhamdulillah, so the charts, inshallah, all of us have, and then the book Al-Muyassirat is also available in the back if anyone wants to pick up a copy. The idea over here is that once we go through it, right now we just did a little bit, so then our information, it's not yet complete, but then just from the little bit that we know, we already can identify certain things in the sanad. And then now, the more that we learn, if we just go through the remainder of these charts, we'll be able to identify a lot. So for example, you have, I just went to the first hadith of Sahih al-Bukhari. Okay, we can perhaps see it on the screen. Maybe it's a little bit small. I'll try to make it a little bit bigger.
That's good.
Is that good? Yeah? A little bit bigger. Okay, here, let's see if I can go like this. And I don't know if I can hide this. Maybe like this. Yeah, there we go. Perfect. Inshallah.
A little bit bigger if you want.
Yeah. Okay, is this good? Okay. So we see, is there any name in the sanad that we can already recognize?
You can tell them to keep their charts in front.
You can also keep your charts in front of you too.
Right now we're going through Bukhari.
This is Sahih al-Bukhari, so any chart related to Sahih al-Bukhari. So any name over here that we can recognize, of course, Umar ibn al-Khattab we all know about, right? Is there any other name that we can recognize? Sufyan ibn Uyayna, we talked about him. What do we know about Sufyan ibn Uyayna? Student of Zuhri, right? Abdullah bin Zubair al-Humaydi, in Muyassirat we'll see that he's mentioned as Athbatu Nasi an Shaykhihi, and he's also one of the common shuyukh of Bukhari as well. So that's one thing that we recognize. Let's go to the second hadith of Bukhari. Does anyone recognize anything? Malik. Okay, what else do we recognize? Okay, Aisha radiallahu anha. But there's one more thing, maybe something earlier even than Malik. Something earlier than... okay. Yeah, go ahead. Abdullah bin Yousuf at-Tanisi, very good. Okay, what do we know about him? He's one of the common shaykh of Bukhari, and then who's his common shaykh? One of the common jaddat going upwards? Malik. So then we didn't need to go very far. In the very second hadith of Bukhari, remember we said it comes up 277 times, right in the beginning too? I didn't notice it. Yeah, so we see that the same thing comes up. Abdullah bin Yousuf at-Tanisi from Malik. Hisham Urwa, do we know anything about Urwa? Urwa and Aisha, he's one of the common students of Aisha. So we look at the second sanad, and then now we can look at it. Let's say that we're narrating this hadith. We're saying, كيف يأتيك الوحي? We're maybe speaking about this. Then you can narrate the hadith, you can mention it. You can also just look at the sanad and glance at it and say, oh yeah, I mean this I can memorize because I already know this part. Abdullah bin Yusuf at-Tanisi and Malik, I already know that. I memorized that. Hisham Urwa and Aisha, I already know that too. So all you need to do is instead of 5 distinct pieces and you're not sure how they connect, we already know how they connect. It's basically just 2 pieces. Abdullah bin Yusuf at-Tanisi from Malik, that's one. Hisham Urwa Nabihi, Urwa and Aisha, we already know that, radiyallahu anha. And then we say, okay, the whole sanad for this, not looking, is Abdullah bin Yusuf at-Tanisi and Malik and Hisham Urwa and Aisha. So I can just glance at it and then be able to know it. Let's go to the third hadith in Bukhari. Okay, so this one, sure. Okay, Yahya ibn Bukair, he's actually in the chart too. Can anyone see if he's in the chart of the common shuyukh from Bukhari? Which number is he? Number 7. So we didn't go through the whole thing, but it's there. Okay, Yahya ibn Bukair. Okay, now Layth, maybe some of us have heard the name before. Does anyone know his full name? Layth bin Sa'ad, if we know him, great. If we don't know him, that's okay too. Is there any other name that we recognize in here? Uqayl, what do we know about Uqayl? Right, big student of Ibn Shihab. And then who is Ibn Shihab again? Zuhri, right? Ibn Shihab is Zuhri. And then Zuhri, what is Zuhri going upwards over here? Zuhri and Urwa and Aisha radiyallahu anha. So we say, oh wow, I know this. Zuhri and Urwa and Aisha. I know that. Uqayl, I know is a student of Ibn Shihab. I know Yahya ibn Bukair. Once we go through the chart, we'll see it. So the only name that maybe we might not know yet or how it connects is Layth. But memorizing one thing is a lot easier than memorizing 5 or 6 separate names and not knowing how they connect. So again, we can just glance at this and say, yeah, I can probably memorize the sanad too. Yahya ibn Bukair قال حدثنا الليث عن عقيل عن الزهري عن عروة عن عائشة. I think I can memorize it. So we can just glance at it. The only thing we really need to know is after Yahya ibn Bukair is Layth. Layth narrates from Uqayl. Okay, can anyone just take this in? Take one moment to just intake this, and then I want someone to try to say this whole sanad for us without looking. Okay. Any of the Dora students can tell us, and we'll have one of the sisters. If there are any sisters who are in Dora, they can say it to each other, inshallah. Okay. You want to say it? Very good, mashallah. Did everyone hear that? So he said it. Now, did he take hours to memorize it? All it did was he just glanced at it, maybe took a moment to take it in, and that's it. Yeah, mashallah. So then once we know the main pieces, then pretty much everything will just kind of click together. So
I also remember on one occasion, more like scope for the utility of this is, once when I was studying with Mawlana Muhammad Abbas Umar Hafidhullah, someone who is he's a mutakhassis in hadith, a specialist in hadith, then I had one particular hadith I was looking up in a primary source which is not very well known. And so I asked Mawlana Muhammad Sahib, Mawlana, what's the hukum of this narration? Is it reliable or is it not reliable? So he just glanced at it once and he said, yeah, inshallah, it should be reliable. Just check up this one particular name, and if you find out that he's reliable, then it's suitable to quote. I was so blown away. I was like, subhanallah, like inshallah, maybe we can also reach this level. But at that time, I was wondering, how is a person supposed to just look at the hadith and the sanad, and just by glancing at it, like taking 2 seconds, he was like, yeah, this should be reliable. Just check this one particular person, and it should be fine. Then after a while, in the Suhbah of Mawlana Muhammad Sahib, and then we're going over his Muyassirat, then we realize, subhanallah, once you memorize these famous asanid, especially those which are considered, like, those which are in Sahih Bukhari, then very easily you can look at other asanid. And these are the most prolific narrators. So they're going to be in many other books of hadith as well. And then you'll be able to glance at them and be able to grade them as well. Of course, this is an expert in the field, someone who spent over like 10, 15 years in the company of great mutakhassizun like Sheikh Muhammad Awama, Hafidhullah. So it would be